Hey everyone, Wayne Fox. So that was the new Trebleet, I don't know how you say it. Anyway, the new Trebleet ThunderBolt 5 80 gigabit per second SSD Enclosure. You get that all out of my mouth there. I've had this on order for a while. I've been using the one from Acasis, and of course I will make some comparisons to that one. They both seem to be pretty good choices. I will say up front, this one is less expensive, although Acasis, normally if you buy direct from them, you'll get a pretty substantial discount, usually around 10 to 15%, which makes them a little bit easier. This one I did order from Amazon, and you can't order these from Amazon. Acasis, I don't believe theirs is on Amazon yet. I like the device, although I will admit that internally it looks a little, maybe say sparse. The circuit board is definitely much smaller, and it'll only hold a 2280 SSD. There's no ability to hold a shorter one. Not that that's too important. Most noticeably, the fan is much smaller in this one. And because the Acasis fan is quite a bit larger, I think it's turning much slower. This one is definitely more noticeable and has more fan noise than the Acasis. It's actually close to silent, unless you've got a really super quiet room. If it's a few feet away, you're going to have a hard time hearing it. I will admit that, I'm 70 years old and my ears maybe aren't as good as some people, but I think most people would be okay with the Acasis. This one might be a little annoying if you have a fairly quiet environment, but it performs pretty well. Thought I'd just show a size comparison real quick. This is the Acasis, almost exactly the same length. The Acasis is slightly narrower. I'd say they're pretty close to the same thickness. I think this one is this one's a little thicker. So it's a little narrower, but a little thicker. Weight, very close to the same. This is actually pretty solid metal. It's not, real thin and kind of tinny feeling like the one I used to use, which was a similar construction to this. The other thing I thought I'd mention is there's a second port here. Little confusion as to that. It says power delivery. I can't really find documentation on it, but I do know that this is compatible with USB. Well, I thought I should do a little digging, and I did find some information on our website, actually easy to find. Not quite what I thought. The purpose of this port is to supply auxiliary power if the host port you're connecting it to doesn't supply enough. Now, I did find out it's not USB 3.2 compatible. The controller chip used in this, as well as the Acasis, is only USB 4, Thunderbolt 3, 4, and 5 capable. Now, USB 4 port can supply as little as 7.5 watts of power, and that might not quite be enough for an SSD, especially a large one like an 8 terabyte one. Thunderbolt ports should be okay because they have to supply at least 15 watts, and some USB 4 ports supply more than that as well. But just in case the port is underpowered, you can supply auxiliary power and thus use the device on a computer with a, quote, underpowered USB 4 port. So I've got the Samsung device in it to start with, the 990 Evo Plus. Let's just kind of see what it does, kind of see how that works. We're going to do two tests. First, they call it a synthetic test, which is basically black magic. Write a file, read a file, write a file, read a file. And then we're going to do my standard 400 gigabyte file transfer. And I'm actually going to do it twice, giving it just a brief amount of time in between. That's sort of to see how the SLC cache is doing it. Anyway, let's see what it does. Let's see what we get when we throw this thing on my computer. We're going to plug it directly into the Mac with a really high-end Thunderbolt cable and see what we get with the speed. Okay, so the first thing I do before each test is I reformat the drive. This makes sure that the drive is completely empty. It should clear the SLC cache so I get good data. We're going to make sure we have the target disk loaded, which is the Evo Plus. And let's see how we do. Okay, not bad. 5800, 5500, 5500, 5600. So it looks like our write speeds are going to hover right around 58, 56 read. And of course, I've always said that the read speed is actually usually more important. You do a lot more reading of data as you work on things than you do writing of data. So we're going to jump ahead about 3 minutes now, and we're still getting really good speeds. This is, I think, 3 or 4 minutes later, and still getting 58, 55. Every once in a while, the 58 will slow down to like 3,000. Seems a little weird, but overall, we're getting really solid performance out of this Evo Plus. And as you can see, the temperature is still is under 100 degrees, so we really haven't pushed the temperature of the device at all. Okay, so now let's do the file transfer. This is a 400 gigabyte disk image file. It has about 380 gigabytes of data in it, so it's not just an empty one. And we're just gonna drop it into the Evo Plus and see what it does. As you can see, I can monitor down below with disk utility, and it gives me a really nice, fairly small but readable graph on the data transfer. And we're getting about 6 gigabytes per second, or 6,000 megabytes per second transfer speed. So it's doing pretty good. Let's just let it finish out and see how long it takes. Okay, that took about 1 minute and 6 seconds, which according to this calculator is a little over 6,000 megabytes a second. Now, interestingly enough, we didn't hit the SLC cache. What I'm going to do is actually wait a few seconds. I'm going to run it again to see if I hit that limit of that SLC cache, because once you hit that, it slows down a lot. Like we're talking down to 1,500 megabytes a second. Let's drag and drop it again. We're going to tell it to keep both so it's not overriding the other one. And let's just see if we hit that SLC cache limit and at what point we do. As you can see, our temperature is still great. We're still only at 108 degrees. And right now we've written almost 500 gigabytes of data and still getting that 6 gigabytes per second, or 6,000 mega. Oh, right there we hit it. So right at about 100 megabytes of data, we hit the SLC cache limit after 500, or I should say 500 gigabytes of data and about a 1 minute pause. And now you can see we're at the 1.4 to 1.5 gigabit per second, or gigabytes per second speed that this device is capable of once your SLC cache is full. So that took 3 minutes and 28 seconds, which comes up to a speed average of about 1,900 megabytes a second. But of course, once the cache is full, you're basically operating at about a 1,600 megabyte per second speed. I'm not sure if the Samsung uses triple level cell technology or quad level cell technology, but the bottom line is the native speed of a quad level or a triple level cell much slower than a single level cell, and that's the best you're going to get. The only time you're going to hit it is when you're doing a massive file transfer, and of course that's assuming the device that you're copying from can actually read the data that fast. I'm testing this with the assumption that my internal SSD can supply the data as fast as I need, but it could be this device would write faster than that if the internal SSD was a lot faster. And I really don't have a way to test that at this point in time. It's really fast, so I'm pretty happy with the speed anyway. Well, the good news is that SLC cache is obviously really, really big, and we really don't hit it until we do massive file transfers, for which most people, that really doesn't make a lot of difference. Just for curiosity, let's take a real quick look on how the Western Digital Black performs in this device. So here's the Western Digital Black 4 terabyte version, 5,900, 5,800, maybe slightly better. I'm not sure what that little stutter was. 5,900, 5,800, almost 6,000 on the right. So it's performing slightly better. We're going to skip ahead 3 minutes again like we did before, but pretty much consistent at the 59. So it's a great device as well. You'll notice, however, that the temperature of this is up to 120 or 135 degrees. So it's getting pretty warm. Let's drop our 400 gigabyte file on there. And at this point, you can see we're getting similar results, about 6 gigabytes a second. Let's fast forward to the end. And as you can see, we didn't hit the SLC cache here either. We did 6 gigabytes a second. Now what I did this time is I'm just waiting, and we're going to now pop it in again real quick after about a minute like we did before. At this point, what's interesting is I am not going to hit an SLC cache limit. Let's just zip forward a little bit And as you can see, we're still getting the 6 gigabits per second speed. And we don't hit that limit at all. So both of those took exactly 1 minute and 6 seconds. The second one wasn't any slower. I transferred 800 gigabytes of data without hitting the SLC cache limit. Now understand, these are freshly formatted. There's no data on them. As you use these devices and as they fill up, real world performance is going to degrade. But it appears that the SLC cache in the Western Digital is much more robust. I think if I did this eventually, I would hit that SLC cache in that device, because I know the Western Digital definitely uses 128 layer triple level cell technology. And so it's got, it's probably only capable of about a 1600 megabyte per second native speed once that cache is full. Now we noticed that the Western Digital, it got pretty hot at 156 degrees. And that surprised me a little bit, because with the internal cooling, you would think that it could handle it. It doesn't even get that hot, other than I think the Satechi, it got a little hot, because I don't think its cooling is quite as good. But even the Acasis 405, which with the fan off, it didn't get that hot. So what I decided to do was change out that thermal pad. Now this thermal pad, these blue ones, a lot of times they're really cheap. It's pretty thin. I'm not sure it was making good contact with the case. And I put one of these really high quality thermal pads in. I think I used the 1.5 millimeter one. It comes with a 1.5 and a 2. These are rated at 15 watts per MK or whatever. So they're very, very conductive. And I decided to run the test again with a new thermal pad. And it indeed did make a difference. Let's just take a look. So after installing the thermal pad, I ran the 400 gigabyte test again. We're going to speed this way up to just kind of show you the whole thing real quick. You can watch that Western Digital black temperature creep up. Something happened right here, which was really weird. For just a split second, it dropped and then it picked right back up. I assume that was something to do with the operating system that decided to do something right at that moment. So the end of the first test is coming up. Now here we have the second test. And as you can see, our temperature is staying substantially lower. We're still only 117 degrees. And if we just pop all the way to the end, you'll see that we max out at about 124 degrees. This kind of points out a problem that I've mentioned before when you buy these SSDs and do them yourself. Sometimes the thermal pads are poor quality. You have no rating on it. You have no idea what it might do. And in this case, I don't think it was thick enough. I wasn't making good contact with that shell. The fan is actually pulling air into the device, but the outer case is still acting like a heatsink. And even though it's pretty solid, it's not thin or anything like that. Once I got a good connection to that SSD with that outer case, then temperature wasn't a problem. So that might be something you need to be aware of, not just with this device. I've actually had that issue a little bit with other ones. Now the Samsung's not a problem. I didn't put that other thermal pad on it. It just runs a lot cooler. It uses less wattage. Somehow the controller chip uses less power, and that takes the temperature down. Understand, when you read the temperature of an SSD, you're reading the temperature of the controller chip, which is really the critical element. It's the one that can overheat and get too hot and thermal throttle. The NAND chips themselves don't work very well when they're cool and actually need to be warm. And even temperatures 130, 140 is a pretty good operating temperature for a NAND. There's a lot of debate on that, but definitely if they're cool, they don't work well. So if the drive sits idle for a long time, those NAND chips might get maybe not warm enough to work efficiently. That's why almost all SSDs have this label on them. It's really not a label. Most of the time, or maybe all the time, this is actually a thermal conductive piece of copper or something similar to that, which takes heat from that controller chip and keeps those NAND chips warm and hot. And of course, now you're regulating that by pulling temperature from that label into the case and keeping it a little more regulated. The last thing really to address is the fan noise. It's sitting right here, maybe 3.5 feet from my ear. Pretty obvious. I can hear it. My MacBook Pro's fans are not running, or at least they're running slow enough that I can't hear them. I think it's considerably louder. I'm not sure of a good way to test that and just demonstrate it. I think what I'll try, let's just hold it over here and we'll kind of bring it up to my lavalier. So we're going to be about that far away. Now let me just grab the Acasis and do the same thing. Maybe that'll demonstrate the difference. Otherwise, I guess you'll just kind of have to take my word for it. Sorry about that. Okay, so now I have my Acasis here. I can't hear the fan from this distance. I can't hear it at all. It's substantially quieter. I mean, it's obvious. Let me just try the same experiment. Even when I've got it up here next to me, I can't hardly hear it. I can hear it. But as you can, hopefully from that, you can tell it's really, really quiet. So if noise is important to you, it might be worth spending a little extra. Now I will mention Acasis has the TB501 Pro that they're selling now. The Pro is a little more money, but it has a switch that turns that fan off and on. And 95% of the time, you probably don't need that fan. If you're not doing some heavy file transfers, then you can turn the fan off, and that's really a nice feature, even though, like I said, I really can't hear it. Well, there you go. I think it's a pretty good device. I do need to be honest that I do get a little commission through an affiliate link from Acasis, and I made it pretty clear that that's not going to bias me. I'm going to keep both these devices. I'm not going to sell this one so I could buy another Acasis. The fan noise, this device doesn't get used too often, only when I travel. Fan noise I can live with, won't really bother me at all. I do like the Acasis a little better, and I think for a lot of people it might be maybe a little bit better investment, but to be honest, this thing's really fast. And I think that for a lot of people, it's a good choice. So that being said, there's an Amazon link to buy this in the down below. You, of course, can go to Trebleet's website and order it. I do not have an affiliate link there, but you can also order the Acasis from my affiliate link and directly from them. Unfortunately, it will take a little bit of time because it will ship direct from their facility in China. Now, at some point, they will probably have that available on Amazon, and when that is available, I'll put a link there. Of course, I do get a little bit of money if you buy it from Amazon. I just try to make a little bit of extra money with these links because I'm trying to afford to buy all these devices, and it's a lost cause, I promise you, it's a lost cause. But I enjoy testing this kind of stuff. I have been doing it for 30, 40 years, just always playing with new tech like this. Well, if you have any questions or comments, appreciate those down below. And until next time, see ya.